So,
Do you remember that?
like,
Here's
of
the
course I
earth.
remember that. Oh my God. Okay, so.
I am tired. Exactly, yes.
Yes. Anywho, welcome to Ice Creamy Scream. We're your weekly scoop of the most chilling histories, mysteries, and true crime. My name's Kathryn.
I'm Gina.
Every month we choose a new topic and a new ice cream flavor to go along with it. This month's topic is werewolves, and the ice cream flavor we'll be enjoying while we talk about werewolves is Blue Moon. So grab a spoon and let's dig in. And right off the bat, I do have to say I do not have Blue Moon ice cream today.
I was gonna ask.
I'm so sorry. Can I real quick tell this story as to
Of course.
why I don't? Because I really tried so hard. The reason I don't have Blue Moon ice cream is because it spilled all over my kitchen floor in the midst of making it. So I'm frazzled and upset.
Did that happen today?
Like 2 hours ago.
Oh my God, Kathryn, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sad because I put it all together and I put it in the ice cream maker and it was like, it was going, like the thing was spinning, but it wasn't, I could tell it wasn't attached the way it was supposed to. Like the other thing is supposed to like scrape it or whatever as it spins, and it wasn't doing that. I tried to like disassemble it and put it back together correctly, but I couldn't get it down to where it needed to be because it had already started freezing to the thing. And when I tried to say just fuck it and like take the thing out, it was stuck and I like went like this and it went whoosh all over the kitchen. Anyway.
What, are you eating something if you don't have Blue Moon?
Yes.
What is your solution?
That's what I was just going to say. Yep.
Okay.
Girl Scout cookies came in last night.
Oh, which ones?
So, of course, we got one of each.
Yes.
Sometimes multiples of a few. These are relatively new. I don't know when the last time you had Girl Scout cookies was. Did I say that right? The last time you had Girl Scout cookies?
It was years ago.
So these are new. They're called like Toastier or something like that.
It kind of looks like a piece of toast.
Yeah, and it's like a frosted piece of toast.
Oh my God, yum!
It's good. I love these things. They're very good with coffee. So I'm drinking coffee too. A little toast and coffee.
We've definitely had the what's your favorite Girl Scout cookie conversation before, but I can't remember. Are you a Thin Mints person? Is that what it is?
So, yeah. Traditionally, like back in the day when I was little, through and through, Thin Mint. But in my elder years, I love the lemon cookies. Lemonades. I don't think they were called lemonades when we were little. Maybe I'm wrong. I never called them lemonades. And also, the grandma in me, I love the shortbread. I love the shortbread cookies.
I'm sure I would love those now. As a kid, they were the worst ones.
The worst one. I used to be so disgusted. They were my dad's favorite. And I'd be like, ew, what's the point? I get it now. I'd like to offer a public apology for all of the old people I ever made fun of for liking those shortbread Girl Scout cookies. Yeah, if I had to choose, I'd probably still say Thin Mint because that's what I'm used to saying. But I think in practice, it's not anywhere close to my favorite anymore.
I would kill for a box of Samoas.
Oh, we have a couple of those. I think that's Phil's favorite.
Samoa. But Thin Mints are also, I loved Samoas when I was a kid. Those were my favorite when I was little. So it's very nostalgic. When I got older, I got into the Thin Mint game and I've never looked back.
Yeah.
Fucking love those things.
Yeah, which is funny because I think we've talked about this before. I am not a mint chocolate person, but Thin Mints are the way I like it. Like the chocolate to mint ratio. I like it when it's mostly chocolate with a bit of mint, not vice versa.
And the texture is so good.
So good. Which, and if Phil's listening, he's upset right now because they recently changed. They did change the formula. It is a little bit different. I didn't notice until Phil started complaining about it and literally has not stopped for the last 3 years. But as much as I hate to say it, he is right. It is different. but I would argue that it's not worse. It is different, but it's not worse in my opinion.
I mean, I will still eat that shit up. I guarantee it.
I didn't even notice. I had a great time eating them until he pointed that out. And I was like, oh, yeah, it is different.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind. I'm also now considering that, like, a good portion of our listeners are not in the States.
Oh yeah,
and
like
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they have Girl Scout cookies anywhere but the US. I don't think they do.
Oh, I don't
so
know.
it's basically a thing where, I don't know, a little girl knocks on your door and asks, do you want cookies? And then you say yes. And then like 3 months later you get cookies.
Yeah. Nowadays you can get them online, so it's not as magical, but like.
What?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. So that's like Phil brought home like 20 boxes. We froze like 15 boxes of Girl Scout cookies last night.
Yum. Frozen Thin Mints are so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We put the Thin Mints in. That was like the first one. I was like, put the Thin Mints away. Yeah.
Okay, so I do have another thing. We got a comment on Spotify about the origin of Blue Moon ice cream. And I just got the notification on my phone like right now. Okay. So I want to read it to you.
Oh my god, fun. I love that. I just checked our comments like a couple hours ago. I was like, I missed that one.
It's brand new. Yeah.
Yay!
Okay, so it's cool. From someone, their username is Mater P, and it says, excellent. The Blue Moon flavor of ice cream was created at House of Flavors in Ludington, Michigan in the 1930s. I lived a 10-minute walk away from House of Flavors, HOF, for 10 years. It's one of the best flavors next to Superman ice cream.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Didn't know that. Fucking shout out to House of Flavors. That's so cool.
Thank you for letting us know. That's funny because I've been thinking a lot about Superman ice cream since we chose Blue Moon. Because I feel like those are the two you mentioned in that episode that it was a very like childlike flavor.
Same as Superman.
I wonder what, because I also don't know what Superman flavor is. I think that's supposed to be more cherry. I could be wrong, but I think it's another mystery flavor.
It's like a fruit mystery thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be easy to make though with all the swirls of colors.
No. Yeah, no, I don't think we should ever choose to make that. Let me rephrase. I don't think I should ever choose to make that. I have PTSD now. We'll see if I ever get I still have not eaten Blue Moon ice cream.
I'm so sorry. If I lived closer, I would bring you some. I can describe it really in detail.
My rating for this month is going to be very low because I have not had any. I've had a good experience with all the non-Blue Moons that I've had, so I don't know.
I guess it'll all come down to the next week, the final werewolf episode.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah, hopefully I can figure out. I'm nervous that my ice cream maker is broken. Like, the pieces were not fitting together. Well, I wonder if it got bent or something. I followed the instructions. I don't usually do that. I did reread the instructions before I went about it, and it just wasn't. That's okay. That's behind us now. We've
changed. We've grown.
I'm enjoying my cookies. I'm gonna have to mute myself when I'm eating my cookies because they are very crunchy.
It's okay.
So anyway, do you have a story for us?
Me?
Yes, you.
I do.
Excellent.
One moment.
I'm gonna sell back. I'm gonna mute myself. I'm gonna eat my cookies and listen.
So we've all heard about the witch trials of yonder times. But what if I told you that people were also put on trial for being werewolves? You would freak out and probably lose your mind and listen to this podcast every day until you die. I know. Yeah. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, many Europeans thought that just like witches walked among them, so too did werewolves. And in fact, the two often went hand in hand. So much so that when a person was on trial for witchcraft, there was a chance they would be on trial for werewolfery too. I don't know about you, Kathryn, but I kind of had trouble reconciling this idea in my head when I was researching this, because on the one hand, you have witch trials, which were obviously horrible and tragic and unjust, but I can at least, this is going to sound bad, but I can kind of understand why someone could be found guilty of witchcraft, because witchcraft isn't always something you can see. So convictions rely on like witness testimony. But werewolves, are a whole different fucking thing. Like, can't you just keep an eye on someone and tell that they are not also a wolf? And yet the werewolf trials happened. So what the fuck is going on here? That was my initial reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I have nothing to add to that because yes, 100%. That would be my like absolute
Same page.
immediate thought. Yeah.
As always, same page. So, okay, let's take a step back. Let's get some historical context going. Before we talk about the werewolf trials, we do have to talk a little bit about witchcraft first, which I don't think any of us will mind.
Oh
So,
no.
if you, oh no, heavens, witchcraft again
Witchcraft on this podcast.
on my good Christian podcast.
My word. That's like 7 different regions I just did. I don't know where.
And all of them probably believed in werewolves.
100%. Absolutely.
So, humanity has believed in or suspected people of witchcraft since ancient times. Obviously, it depends on where in the world you're looking, but in the case of Europe, there were rumors going around about witches from basically the very start. And witchcraft wasn't always seen as a bad thing. It wasn't unheard of for people to use magic in kind of a practical, everyday way. And knowledge of it had been passed down through generations through things like oral storytelling traditions. It wasn't like a switch flipped. It wasn't like some shit happened one day and suddenly magic was evil. There was kind of a general nervousness about people who used magic with bad intentions. And even in pagan times, there were laws against magic that could be seen as harmful. But sadly, pagan times did not last forever. With the growth of the Catholic Church, witchcraft stopped being a spectrum of good and bad, and it became more or less just all bad news bears. By the time the 1400s came around, something of a social panic was already starting to brew in Europe. And there were a lot of kind of social stress factors that contributed to this. So there was a lot of plague and sickness. There was also a thing called the Little Ice Age, where there were extreme temperature fluctuations for actual centuries, which I think is really interesting. And that led to things like failed harvests, bad yields, that sort of stuff. There were also a lot of wars going on, just a lot of very stressful and arguably upheaving events, all of which caused people to kind of start looking for a scapegoat, which I feel like is becoming a recurring theme in my episodes.
Yeah.
Now, this was a time of extreme misogyny. So many of these frustrations were kind of projected onto women as a social class, namely through witchcraft accusations. It is worth noting that not all people who were accused of being witches were women. There were certainly some who were men, but it was mostly women. Now, you're probably thinking, Gina, this is an episode about werewolves, and you've been talking about witches for many, many minutes now. That is because the werewolf trials were a lot like the witch trials. And in fact, a belief in and fear of witches developed more or less in parallel to a belief in werewolves. So let's explore how that happened. 600 years ago, the church was basically everything in Europe. And people who went against the church, i.e., heretics, were one of the worst types of people you could be by society's standards. When the infamous Malleus Maleficarum came out in 1486, it likened witchcraft and other forms of devilry, werewolves, to heretical behavior. And if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with the Malleus Maleficarum, you're in for a fucking treat because it's a very interesting and very bad little piece of history. So its name in English translates to the Hammer of Witches, if that tells you anything. And it was basically the guidebook on how to both identify and punish witches, including things like torturing and murdering the people who were accused. It was written by some Catholic dude, no surprise there. And when it was published, it got a ton of attention for its treatment of witches, and it still does to this day. Like, you still hear the Malleus Maleficarum talked about a lot. But buried in its pages was something that we don't talk about very much. A warning that devils and witches could inhabit the body of a wolf to murder people. And in the example that it gives, specifically murder children. The book directly linked both witches and werewolves to things like making a pact with the devil, which of course can only be remedied by divine punishment. And who better to carry out the will of God than a bunch of scared men with all the power in the world?
That's what I always say.
It basically encouraged people to take all of their anxiety about the world, all of those factors that we talked about earlier, and channel it into extreme persecution and violence. This book is often cited as one of the primary catalysts for what would be a massive and violent panic about witches and werewolves, leading to the centuries of bloodshed that we hear about today. But within this context, accusations of being a werewolf weren't just like, oh, you were bit by a werewolf, therefore you turn into one whenever the full moon comes around, like we hear now. It was really just an accusation of having the ability to transform into a wolf or having the ability to charm wolves to do your will, which is so fucking dope.
That's so
right?
cool.
Imagine having a wolf as your like familiar. I wrote in my notes, I would name mine Fernando.
Oh my god.
Isn't that a great name for a
name
wolf?
My lizard when I get a lizard someday, but no one will ever let me have one. My mom would never let me have one. Phil won't let me have one. No one will let me have a lizard named Fernando.
That would be so cute. So Fernando the lizard?
Fernando.
The lizard.
Anyway, yes, I think a wolf named Fernando would be significantly cooler than a lizard named Fernando. But lizard named Fernando's funny.
That is funny. I like that a lot. What kind of lizard? I'm sorry, I do need to pause on this for a second.
Just like one of those little green ones, like a little tiny,
like a tiny little gecko or something.
Yeah, like I don't want a big dragon thing.
So
I just want one
cute.
Of those little, yeah, just a little. Yeah.
I can see it.
But
that's cute.
Yeah, he would get eaten by one of the mammals in this home, not the humans.
Yeah,
just to be clear. Anyway,
yeah, he probably would. Maybe someday. I digress.
Yes,
we can return to this later.
I digressed you.
In the centuries following the publication of the Malleus Maleficarum, there were a plethora of werewolf trials, which differed from the witch trials in a few important ways. Contrary to the witch trials, which were pretty much everywhere, werewolf trials were mostly concentrated in France, Germany, and Eastern Europe. All areas whose legal frameworks were very heavily tied to Catholic doctrine, and all areas where wolves existed in droves. Before anyone comes for me, yes, wolves absolutely definitely existed in other parts of Europe, but they were extra present in the areas that we are talking about. So it kind of makes sense that this fear would develop.
Yeah, I also think, and this is, don't come after me either, but from what I know of folklore, I feel like those regions do have a lot more stories about wolves than a lot of other regions. Like, not saying that other regions don't, but like I feel like there's a lot of legends and lore and just fables that have to do with wolves that are connected.
They're like a recurring
to, like, German mythology.
Trope.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. Also, and this was interesting, I did not know this, accusations of witchcraft were mostly targeted towards women. That is not the part that I didn't know. I did know that. Whereas werewolf accusations were mostly directed towards men. And the key word here is mostly. There were definitely women who were accused of being a werewolf too. One example of this comes in 1459 when a Swiss woman named Kathryn was accused of being a werewolf. It's
no
you.
Way.
Although I hope it's not you, but because, yeah. I'll tell you what happened to her.
Oh.
Let me tell you what happened to her, and then you can decide if you want to be that Kathryn. So she claimed, likely after a bit of torture, that she transformed into a wolf with the help of a magical ointment, and that while she was in her wolf form, she had caused an avalanche. As punishment, it was ordered that the executioner should, and this is a quote, divide her into two pieces, of which one shall be her head and the other her body, which shall be so completely severed that a cartwheel can be rolled between them, which feels like a very misplaced piece of whimsy.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I'm like, thank you so much for saying that. Misplaced misplaced piece of whimsy because, like, immediate response was to laugh, not because it's funny, just because, like, what a strange way to say everything that was just said. First of all,
Yeah.
sorry, I have to interrupt because what
No,
the fuck?
please do.
The distinction of separating someone into two pieces and then going on and basically just describing a beheading is so specific in a way that I could not imagine. Like, I would never have thought that up to phrase it that way ever in my life.
And
Like,
then to
someone being
say,
beheaded is
yeah.
split into two pieces. What the
Mm-hmm.
fuck?
And that
And
the head
then,
has to be so far away from the body that you can do a cartwheel between. Also, you don't need that much space. Wait, okay, actually, I was thinking about doing the cartwheel like horizontally. Maybe it means a
oh.
cartwheel like the vertical way. So it's like a
And does
full
it mean like from
rotation.
the start of the cartwheel to the end of the cartwheel, or just like your body span?
That executioner must have been so stressed because you got to know he had those questions too, I'm sure. Did he have to be
Dude,
the one
this is
cartwheeling?
what? I was gonna say, who is doing the cartwheeling? And like, depending on how, like, my cartwheel stride is going to be very different from someone who's like 6'10", you
Yeah,
know? Oh my God, that's
I
so
know.
fucking weird. That is wild. That's a wild
It's
sentence.
wild. And once she was dead, her body was burned and the ashes were thrown into the river because a normal execution just wouldn't be fucking dramatic enough, I guess. Like, it was the
No.
most extra execution
Oh
ever.
my God.
But like I said, it was mostly men that were getting accused. And the reason why alleged werewolf attacks were very violent in nature. And that kind of behavior, violence, has been attributed to men throughout history. So this really is just kind of a gender role and stereotype thing. Like, girls are witches, boys are werewolves. And that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
end of the story. So I don't know. I wanted
Sorry,
it to
I
be more
just,
interesting than that.
in my head, what just happened was, yeah, exactly. Just like cats are girls and dogs are boys, except for Yorkies.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why.
And
Just
like
in my head,
the
that's how it is.
the number 7 has the same vibes as a Thursday.
Thursday, yeah.
Yes, 100%.
What color is, does seven have a color for you?
Purple.
Oh, okay. Mine's like a burnt orange.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I
We
like
should
that.
compare our number colors
We
sometime.
should.
Okay, I'm going to write them down ahead of time so I can't cheat. Okay, I digress again. One very famous case of a man being accused of werewolfism is that of Peter Stump in 1589 Germany.
I
Have you heard this
almost
story
did
before?
this. I almost did this, but I
Really?
was like, yes, I almost did this as my second story, like for next week. And then I was like, I don't know that much about him. And the more research I did, I was like, this sounds like Gina's going to be talking about it. So I don't know his whole story because I stopped very early on. But yes, I
Okay.
was wondering if you're going to bring him up. He's the only
Yeah.
name I know in this like era of
So
like
I'll give you like the
trials.
Spark Notes version of his
Okay.
story. So Peter was a wealthy farmer, and just a quick sidebar about him. At some point, he lost his left hand, and there's some speculation that his last name, Stump, is just actually kind of a mean nickname that people gave to him for only
Oh my
having one hand.
God.
I know, yeah.
Oh, I did.
So
Okay. Sorry to interrupt again, but I did, when the very little research I did on him, I noticed it was Peter Stump. Also, I think like there were like three or four
tons of
last
different
names.
spellings.
And I was like, are they the same name? But I couldn't tell. So that would make sense. Like if he had a different
Mm-hmm.
last name and it like grew into this nickname. Oh, that's so
It's kind
sad.
of
I hate
mean.
that.
Yeah,
I
I know.
know.
So there were a string of violent attacks in and around the town that he was living in, and he was accused of being the culprit and of being a werewolf. With the guidance of the Malleus Maleficarum handy, he was put on the rack and they tortured a confession out of him. He did break pretty much immediately and he confessed to quite a few things. He said that the devil had given him a magical belt, which, when he was wearing it, let him transform into a, quote, devouring wolf with blazing eyes, massive jaws, and cruel, sharp teeth. He also claimed that when in wolf form, he had killed 2 pregnant women and 14 children, including his own son. which is
Oh,
gnarly. Yeah.
that's sad.
When they asked him where this belt was, he said that he had left it in a specific valley, but they were never able to find it. He was executed that same year in a really rough way. So, trigger warning, Catherine, if you want to take your headphones out, I might recommend that you do because it's going to get gross. Okay. So, basically, they put him on this big torture wheel and they used red hot pokers to rip his skin off in 10 places. Oh, Catherine just made a face. I think she's reading my lips. And then they crushed his limbs with the blunt side of an axe, beheaded him, and burned his body, which just seems like a lot. Anyway, Catherine, you can come back now. Welcome back. He
Okay,
died
wait.
in a really, really gross way.
I'm still practicing my lip reading. Can I guess one of the things you said? Did you mention
Yeah.
something about his skin and like coming off of his body?
Do you really want to know?
Did you say rip his skin off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
gross.
sorry. Okay, well that's everything. You basically heard everything. Or
Sorry.
you
I did.
lip read everything.
I'm proud of myself. I didn't mean to. I've been working on my lip reading,
It's
and that
impressive.
really proved not a good situation for me. Gotta be careful how I use that power. I was kind of hoping I was wrong.
Yeah, no, they drowned him in flower petals.
That's how I'm gonna go.
Flower petals and glitter.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, he died in a super gnarly way. And to
it's
warn
awful.
off other would-be werewolves, the authorities chose to erect a really big pole with a miniature torture device on the top of it and a little statue of a wolf on top of that to represent what happens when people turn into werewolves. And at the very, very top of the pole, they put Peter's head.
Uh,
Yeah,
where was this happening? Did you say? I
Germany.
mean, okay, that's what I thought. I couldn't remember.
Hmm.
I just
Yeah,
anyway. That's awful. That's gross.
yeah. So by this point, we know that Europe just openly fucking hates werewolves for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
In some areas, actually, despite popular belief, werewolves weren't necessarily considered an evil thing, even in light of the Catholic Church and the Malleus Maleficarum. In the 1600s, there was this guy named Theus, and he was kind of an oddball. He openly claimed that he was a werewolf, and he had been claiming this for years. And he said that he was specifically a werewolf in the service of God. Theus, yeah.
What?
Theus
Sorry.
would claim that 3 nights a year he would transform into a quote hound of God, go into hell itself, and fight witches and the devil for things like cursing their crops and whatever. Like physically fight Satan.
What the
Big
fuck?
moves. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we can safely say this was not true. And as to the werewolf claims, there wasn't really any evidence that he was harming anybody, so the authorities just kind of left him to it. He was a laughing stock, but he was a harmless one. I just realized I don't think I said what country this happened in. It was in Livonia, which I think is, it would be like modern day
Livonia.
Latvia and Lithuania. Theus, who was in his 80s at this time, was brought before the court to testify in a completely not werewolf related case. He was a witness to a robbery that had occurred. So literally all he had to do was say, "No, I didn't see shit," and then job over, done.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, when he got into court, he brought up this whole werewolf thing again, and the judges were just like, "What are you doing, dude?" So the judges kind of like get together. They have a little conversation and they're like, I mean, maybe Theus is insane. We can't really use his testimony if he's insane. So, like, maybe we should figure this out. So they started asking around to see if people considered Theus to be of sound mind. And they found that largely, yes, most people did consider him to be sane. So the question then became, if he is sane, but he is still claiming these things, is he a bad Christian? Is he
Mm-hmm.
even Christian at all? So they brought him back and they asked him if he regularly went to church, if he prayed, if he took communion. And in response, Theus basically replied, "No, I'm too old for that shit." Very like these
Sweet.
crazy kids and their religion energy. So funny.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which, and as funny as that is to me, it was a very big strike against him in the eyes of
Mm.
the authorities. Coupled that with the fact that they also found Theus had actually been practicing some basic folk magic for the villagers, and Theus was found guilty of attempting to turn people away from Christianity. So he was flogged and he was banished for life. These days, I think we can all agree that Theus was probably just spinning a tale, but ultimately not a werewolf. That said, not all of the werewolf trials were grounded in verbal testimony alone. One particularly chilling account comes from a French man named Gilles Garnier, who was an
Oh.
actual serial killer and cannibal in the 1500s. Basically, his story is this. So he was a hermit who at some point married a woman named Apolline, which is a gorgeous name.
Yeah.
And when they got married, Giles wasn't used to sharing his life with anyone, so he really struggled to provide for Apolline and the kids that they would eventually have, which created a lot of friction in the household. Around this time, children started to go missing from a nearby town, and some of them even turned up dead. At this point in history, a lot of unsolved murders were attributed to, you guessed it, werewolves. And when the villagers caught Giles in the middle of a violent attack on a young girl, it was like the jig was up. Giles confessed to stalking and murdering at least 4 children. And on at least 2 occasions, he said he ate pieces of them and even confessed to bringing some of the meat home to his wife. Yeah. In his confession, he tried to shift the blame a little bit by saying the devil was the reason he was doing these things. He said that while he was hunting one night, a specter had appeared, offering him a magical ointment, which is kind of a recurring theme, that would let him turn into a wolf. So really, it was Satan's fault.
Classic.
Right? I know. He was ultimately found guilty of being a werewolf as well as being a witch, and he was burned at the stake in 1574.
So wait, was he found guilty of like murdering these people as well? Or
My
was it
understanding is
his?
he was found guilty of murdering them via being a werewolf and a witch. Which is crazy that like being a werewolf or a witch was a
That's
bigger crime than
like
murdering
the
and eating children.
secondary. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what gave me pause. I feel like we say this so many episodes, but the eternal struggle is not ascribing modern day thought to any of the stories that we do. And I guess that that's got to be added to the list of things. I
And
don't
maybe
know.
I'm misunderstanding something, to be fair. Like maybe I'm not understanding the story in its
Yeah.
entirety, but that's how I interpreted it.
But that's the thing that he is known for being.
Yes.
People cared more throughout history about him being found guilty of or as a werewolf
Mm-hmm.
slash witch than a cannibalistic serial killer.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Cool, cool,
Makes
cool. Cool, cool,
sense.
cool. So, trials like this and the werewolf panic and trials in general lasted for hundreds of years, going all the way from the 15th century through the 17th century. It's hard to pinpoint an exact end date to the werewolf trials, but when all was kind of more or less said and done, we have one early source, a guy named Pierre de Lancre. Sorry. Estimated that.
I'm so sorry. You cannot just move past that. Literally, I was like, wait, what is so funny? And then I realized what you were doing. Okay, you want to know what? You know what was in my head, though?
Hmm.
That is, I think, what's her face's last name in Ever After. Did you ever watch that movie?
I don't think. Oh wait,
It's like one of my
Giselle,
favorite movies.
is that her name?
No, no, that's
No, that's
oh, that's
Enchanted.
Enchanted. Yeah, I was like,
I
wait,
don't
is
think I
did I
ever
say that
watched the
wrong?
other one.
Ever After is the one with Drew Barrymore. That's like the Cinderella kind of, not a Cinderella story, but it is a Cinderella story.
Wait, no, I've seen that a
You
long
have
time
to have
ago
seen this. This
though.
was like, oh my
Because
god.
it's funny. It's yes, it's funny because she carries him at one point, and it's like a whole thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, okay, I've
It's not
seen
like
that.
a comedy, but there are funny moments. It's like a girl
Yeah.
power movie without being annoying. I watch it every spring. Every like March, April, I get in the mood
Ah,
to watch that movie. And that's her mother's name is Nicole de Lancre. But
Nicole
you
de
just said
Lancre.
the actual. You said the actual French pronunciation, which I love because
Pierre de Lancre?
well, it's just one of those, like, you know how every single movie, no matter where it takes place in Europe, it could be Germany, France, whatever, every movie they just have a British accent. Like
Yes.
every
Yep.
American movie. So that I've heard it said in a British accent, a fake American British accent, spoken by very American actors with bad British accents, but I've never heard anyone do an actual, like,
I
anyway, I'm
don't know
sorry,
if
that
that was
just like gave
correct.
me pause.
I have no
Sorry,
idea. But
continue.
anyway, this guy named
Sorry.
Pierre, he estimated that 30,000 people were executed for being werewolves in France alone. We do not believe this, though. Modern historians definitely dispute this. And the most common estimate is that the actual numbers were more like 300 people across all of Europe, which is not much
Okay.
compared to the witch trials at all. Tens of thousands of people were tried and killed during the witch trials.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that, again, kept ringing in my head throughout researching this was why? Like, why werewolves specifically? Witchcraft seems like it would be easier to prosecute, and even the Malleus Maleficarum only had werewolves as basically a footnote. So, why did
Mm-hmm.
they put so much energy into finding werewolves when witches were ostensibly the bigger threat? And there are a few reasons why this happened and why it lasted as long as it did. The first, you might have all guessed by now, it's mass hysteria and social panic. Similar to the witch trials, fear and paranoia fueled a ton of false allegations. And when you have a society that's freaking the fuck out, it's going to evolve into a no stone left unturned type of
Mm-hmm.
situation. There is also something to be said about untreated mental illness. Some people genuinely believed they were werewolves. We talked about this a little bit in the Manuel Blanco Romasanta episode. It's a condition called clinical lycanthropy, and some people did genuinely think they could just turn into wolves. So when you have someone saying they can turn into a wolf, and you have a handbook saying that that is heretical behavior, by the standards at that time, you kind of had to fuck them up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But one interesting theory that I think is less discussed is that in the same way the witch trials played into society's misogyny and fear of the unknown, the werewolf trials really played into our innate fear of being eaten by an animal. It's one of, if not the oldest and most primal fears that humans have. And yeah, like we might not believe in werewolves the same way that we used to, but that fear has not gone away. We've just picked a new monster now. Whether it's serial killers, cryptids, AI, we are all still terrified of being hunted by something that is bigger, stronger, and faster than us. And in a time of mass uncertainty, it makes sense that this fear translated into humans projecting that fear onto their fellow man. That's my favorite theory, personally.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. That's like an innate, even just you talking about it. I was thinking of that earlier today. I was thinking of cryptids and Appalachia and all that, how everyone's so scared of the
Oh,
woods.
yeah.
And from my safe northern home where I do and not go in nature very often, I'm like, oh, what's there to be scared of? But catch me literally never going into the woods of Appalachia ever, ever, because that's horrifying. And not just because of, there is a layer of, yeah, there's all this legend and lore and scary stuff around that many, many people genuinely do believe in. I say that I don't, but like my heart rate, if I ever was faced with being in the woods, would like suggest otherwise. I think innately it's just like, oh God, what if? But also just there's beasts in there. Like there's bears, there's animal, like that is actually a dangerous place.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
so I definitely get it. That is very much a, that's an interesting take, including AI in that mix, because that is my biggest fear. Like I definitely
Right?
get that
Like it's
one.
just,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes.
Anyway, I just, yeah, that's
Completely
an
agree.
interesting, I've not heard a theory like that, but it's very, but it almost because it's, I don't think it even needs to be mentioned. Like everyone's afraid of that type of thing in some capacity,
Yeah,
whether
it's
they
just
talk
part of
about it
being
or
human.
not.
It's like the
Yeah.
animal instinct in you is that you're afraid
Yeah.
that something bigger than you is going to chomp down, you know?
That's like a safety thing. Like that's an
Yeah.
evolutionary, like you have
Mm-hmm.
to have that.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting. That's interesting.
I'm glad you liked it because it's my favorite one too.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Good.
I'm going to be thinking of that about that specifically forever now.
Yay! Oh,
You know what I
good.
mean? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I will notice more cuz again, like it's something that happens, but I've never heard it specifically like explained as a reason for things escalating in the way that it has throughout history in many mass hysterias. Because like even that, like you can apply that same theory to witches, and like
Mm-hmm.
we don't understand this power that we are saying that they have, therefore it must be scary and whatever.
Oh, yes.
That's
Yes.
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So,
Anyway,
after over 200 years of panic and persecution, the werewolf trials started to die down as the 18th century style of thinking kind of took over. By this point, it was the age of enlightenment, and the world had started to move away from like a religion first mode of thinking and all of the kind of violence that came along with that. I
mm-hmm.
am not saying the world had abandoned religion. We very clearly have not. But a secular way of thinking was not only allowed, it was encouraged. It was in style to think that way. So things like burning heretics at the stake or catching werewolves wasn't nearly as important as being skeptical and using our critical thinking skills, which
Mm-hmm.
caused the werewolf panic to, by and large, die down. These days, the werewolf trials don't really get as much attention as the witch trials do, which makes a lot of sense. The witch trials went on for a hell of a lot longer and they were much, much bloodier. But just like the witch trials, werewolf accusations were most often levied towards the marginalized, the outcasts, the mentally ill, or just people who authorities didn't want around anymore. So it's worth talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we as a society think that we are beyond this kind of thing, social panics are still very much around. I know that we've mentioned the satanic panic quite a few times on this podcast, and there are even more modern examples. Like, do you remember when everyone was convinced there were killer clowns running around?
Oh my god, I want to talk about that, but I don't know if I can bring a whole story about it because that's literally the story. What was that? 2016? I was in
Something,
Chicago at the
yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I lived in Chicago at the time, and I remember like being afraid to live alone a little bit because that was like a real thing. It was like 2015 or 16. It was one of
It
those two.
was because I
Yeah.
was still in college, and I
Okay.
remember I was working at a coffee shop, and before like the end of the closing shift, you had to go and take all the trash out to this like sketchy
Mhm.
alleyway out like in the back. And I
Yes.
remember making
Yeah.
someone come with me, and I was like looking around for
Hmm.
clowns with a knife or something. I have a
Yeah.
very vivid memory of that.
The street that like the neighborhood I lived in, like it was in the city of Chicago. It wasn't in the middle of nowhere, but I lived on a weird stretch where for some reason there weren't any streetlights, and it was
Hmm.
like it was like a quad building. It was just like a little walk up, and it was kind of a quirky little building. I really liked that apartment, but it was very, very dark for being in the city. So I was always very afraid. That was when I worked as a nanny at the time, and I would get home late some nights or like come home late from class and be like very afraid to walk from my car, and not from literally lived like a block away from like gang territory. Like there were like other things I could have been afraid of, but no, I was literally scared of clowns.
It was
Yeah.
so real. Like a lot of people, I shouldn't say everyone, remembers viscerally how
Hmm.
that felt.
And it was like a short period of time too. Sorry to
It
interrupt
was
again,
really
but it
fast.
wasn't very
Yeah.
long. It just like
No.
came out of nowhere and then kind of went away again.
100%. Yeah.
So,
So humans have always pulled shit like this. And for a
mhm,
relatively short chapter in history, that took the form of werewolves. Thanks
mhm,
to the Age of Enlightenment, we've kind of moved on from this, but only because our fear of werewolves has evolved from a literal belief into a metaphor for something we will never get rid of: the fear of things that are different and the need to control them. End scene. Oh, I have a little question for you. I did a little
oh my
game
god.
that I wanted to play because
Oh,
I
okay.
wanted to see how you would answer it. Okay. So this
Okay.
is a would you rather question.
Oh, I love Would You Rather, but I also am so scared of it because I'm always so afraid that like the stars are going to align as I answer and whatever I choose is going to come true. So
Oh, let me give you the
I'm
options
kind of
first.
nervous.
Okay.
Are they good? Just tell me. I'm
I
so
think they're
sorry.
good.
I'm
I
so
think they're
scared.
good. So option one is you are a werewolf with no control over what happens while you're transformed, but you're like the size of a chihuahua. You're a tiny little like itty bitty werewolf baby. Option 2 is that you're a normal-sized werewolf with control over what happens when you're transformed, but you are really big and scary and people are terrified of you all the time.
Okay, so I have an answer, but let me think for a second longer to make
Okay.
sure I don't miss anything. So my answer is the second one because my fear is if I was a weird little chihuahua thing, some lady would find me and capture me and I would just like end up in some old weirdo's home as a pet and then like the next day she wakes up to a naked woman in her living room which would get the cops called on me.
That's so funny.
That's my fear with that one. So I would rather be. So if I'm big and powerful, I am able to control or I'm not able to control?
You're able to
I am able
control
to
it,
control?
but people like
Okay.
run away from you screaming. Like people are
That's my
terrified
dream.
of you.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is like something I actively would love. I would love to be a big scary beast, but with because the biggest issue I have with being a werewolf, we talked about it in the Manuel episode a little bit, being accused of something horrible or doing something horrible that is completely out of my power is a big fear of mine. Like if I'm forced to do something I would never ever choose to do, I myself would be horrified by that, and then everyone else is like blaming me as well, but like I didn't have any power over it. That's my like biggest, I hate that. That's like the reason I don't want to be a werewolf. So if I can control what I'm doing, sign me up, bite me. Like I'm game. Like straight up.
I would
where do
pick
I
the
sign
first
up?
one. I would want to be the
Why
little
would you
one.
choose the first one?
Because I think the idea of a teensy tiny little baby werewolf who is feral and bites everything is fucking hilarious.
And you don't. Okay, so you don't have control, but do you remember things that you did?
Ooh, I'm going to say
That's an
no.
interesting layer.
Because I feel like memory is a form of
okay.
control.
See, then I definitely don't want that one because I would want to know what was going
Okay.
on. I don't like the thought of
Just
blacking
black
out
out
for a whole night and just never knowing what kind of fun
Black
I had.
out and become like a 4-inch tall little beast.
I
That's
could
hilarious.
totally see. I do not mean this as an insult, but I could totally see you as a chihuahua. I do not mean that as an insult.
You are
But,
the
like,
only person to ever say that to me, ever.
I could see it. I could see it.
I love it.
You do not give chihuahua vibes like in your waking life, but like in this scenario, I could definitely see you as a chihuahua more than like a big mangly beast.
You know, I feel like chihuahuas get an unfair reputation. I knew a chihuahua once named Peanut, and he was the chillest little guy.
I've never known a chihuahua, and I don't care. I still hate them.
Peanut was a good one. I liked Peanut.
I just think, like, here's my thing with chihuahuas. No, I've definitely met a chihuahua. My thing is, why are we so scared all the fucking time? Like
the chihuahuas?
Yeah. Like they're
Yeah.
always shaking and they're always like stop. Just stop it. Like
when they're not doing that, I think they're kind of cute.
Okay. See, and that's the thing. The only chihuahuas I've ever met, that's like their natural state of being. No. There is no time where they're not like that. Yeah. No shade to chihuahuas, but they're an easy target, especially within the confines of a conversation about werewolves. I feel like we have, like, there's no way.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Huh.
Can I ask a question? I just thought of one.
Oh, yeah.
What if, okay, replace the concept of a werewolf with a were-dog. What kind of breed would you want to turn into if you turned into a dog instead of a wolf? Basically, what kind of dog would you think you were?
Do you remember that one time we were at our favorite bar together and there was that dog who was like the size of a horse? I think it was an Irish wolfhound or something like that. It was massive. Yeah. I'd want to be like that. Like either that or like a mastiff, like a Burmese mountain dog, something fucking big.
Wolfhounds, I think I'm pulling this kind of out of my booty. We'll have to check the validity of this, but I think that they are kind of like, there's something with wolfhounds and like werewolf lore. Like I think that there are some stories about people who think they saw a strange wolf beast and it turned out to be an Irish wolfhound. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I believe that.
There's something like that because they do look like a strangely shaped wolf.
Totally.
Yeah, I think there's something to that where there is actual legends or whatever about them.
I want to hear your answer.
That's a good one. I thought I had one, and I'm honestly just naming like my favorite dog breeds at this point. I I would love to be a Doberman, one of the tall ones.
Yeah, I
I
could
just
see
think
that.
they are so beautiful. I don't think I give off Doberman vibes at all, but if I could choose what type of dog to turn into, it would be a Doberman.
I want to make sure I remember what a Doberman looks like before I say the next thing that I'm going to say.
I just think they're
Okay,
so
yeah, you
pretty and so
absolutely give off
cute.
Doberman. They're so like elegant.
They're elegant but cute, but their personalities are they're very the stereotype with them is like big scary dogs, but they're actually very playful and sweet.
I think you
I
could be a
love Doberman.
Doberman. Maybe when you get your lizard, it'll be time.
Maybe when I get Fernando.
Fernando.
All these animals that no one will
I
let me
know.
have.
I
I'm
know.
being deprived.
I said no to getting a second cat recently. I can't do it.
Well, yeah. I there was a cat when we had like the deep freeze recently. It was very,
Mm.
very cold out. There was a little black cat in the alleyway, and the poor little baby was like kind of hovering, like I think it was interested in coming along with me. So I was like trying to get its attention, but it was not moving. I mean, it was like alive and
Mm.
everything, but just wouldn't come with me. And I was like, Cinnamon would kill me in my sleep if I brought another cat in this
Yeah.
house. But we
Poor little
also
baby.
have, yeah, I also think there are like working cats around here, like
Oh,
for
like,
rat. You know what I mean? Like they're not meant to be brought
do you
inside.
want to
They're
hear a
like
fun
released by the
fact?
city. Yes, I do.
Okay, so there is a cat that lives in 10 Downing Street, which is kind of the British White House, and his name is Larry, and he's like an official member of like okay, so he is chief mouser to the cabinet office.
Stop!
Yeah, it's
What?
he has his own Wikipedia page. He's so
That's
cute. And
so
he's very
sweet.
bad at catching mice. Or like he has caught mice, but he kind of just wants to sleep and nap. And his responsibilities are described as greeting guests to the house, inspecting security defenses, and testing antique furniture for napping quality. And it also says he is contemplating a solution to the mouse occupancy of the house and that the solution is still in the tactical planning phase.
That's adorable. I
That's so
love that.
cute. I know.
That's so fun.
Anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah, that was super interesting. I I definitely had heard of werewolf trials and like knew that everything you just said was a thing, but I didn't know any of the details or like theories or anything on it. So yeah, I loved that.
It was a fun one to research.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's a lot to it and it spans so much time,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
This was a very condensed,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Cliff Notes.
Cool. Well, thank you. This was fun. Until next time, little spoons, keep it cool.
Keep it creepy.